What's that? We're live? We're live? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the weekly Spinner Rack, where I'll be your host, Chris. Normally, tonight is a night of news, reviews, and interviews, but tonight will be no different. No, it will be a little special, though, because this is going to be the end of 2024 show. So instead of like mostly news, I'm going to actually have my personal top 10 list of the year. That's out of what I read, which is mostly recommendations. And then after that, we've got, like all sorts of cool comics that came out this week to review. Boy, do I have things to tell you about like some of the cool books that are coming out these days. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a super fun show with all of you. I'm excited to, hear some of your recommendations of comics that you loved this year. And what I thought we'd do first is have a special guest to celebrate. And that by that, I mean masturbating. No, we won't have masturbating Conan as the guest. We're going to have a real live boy on the show, a guy who writes a multitude of genres and has over the years built just such an impressive resume. I don't know. You know what? I've talked to him before. He's one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite people. Folks, let's give a warm welcome to a guy named Rick Remender. Rick, why are you named Rick Remender?
Well, I can't live up to the masturbating bear or to Conan. It seems like you set me up to fail. I can
That's my goal.
masturbate, but I don't have any of Conan's power and any of his thrust.
Yeah, a limp little bit of a tug to celebrate the new year, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of weeping, a lot of tears.
How are you, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty darn well. I'm honestly in a place where I'm personally doing well and excited for 2025. My wife had been sick and she's starting to feel a lot better, and that just puts me in a great mood personally.
Yeah,
personal stuff like that.
Health stuff will put all the rest of it in relative perspective pretty quick.
Doesn't it? Yeah. You went through like, a long period there where, throughout the pandemic to make sure that your family and stuff was safe. You guys were all holed up and keeping safe. Now I guess you're starting to venture out a little bit. Have you guys been able to see other like extended family and friends lately?
Yeah. I love that though. I think that was the last time we talked. It seems like it was maybe 6 months ago. It was like 5 years.
Wait, was it really that long?
It was 2020, I think. I'd
have to think about it. Oh, that's weird. As you get older,
I think I was living in Hawaii. We had gone to hide because it was early days COVID. My wife's autoimmune stuff. They said it would kill her, so we rented a house in Kauai and went and hid there. I think that's awesome. I think the last time we talked, I was promoting The Scumbag, which, that's 2020, 2021.
I'd have to give it some thought. That's entirely possible. I definitely remember that. I feel like we may have talked more recently than that, though, because I remember talking about Holy Roller a bit at some point. I don't know.
You're right. It's my memory. I'm quite old.
You've got a lot of books out. So do they all blend together, or is each one a special little snowflake that cannot be repeated? I'm just putting you on the spot.
For me, I mean, like they have to be, or else I'm they each do a certain thing. I try to make each book do a different thing, and they scratch an itch. I try to write them differently. I try to take different stylistic approaches. I try not to, if you're not constantly experimenting, like I know kind of like. Between the success of Deadly Class and Uncanny X-Force, I know if I'm doing something that's dealing with murder, and I know, the salaciousness, I sort of know a recipe if I wanted to, create something that seemed like it was a surefire thing. But yeah, they do each have, I think, at least I agree, a different reason for existing.
And I've been enjoying what you've been putting out. I've talked up on this show, like as Sacrificers and Napalm Lullaby come out. But my personal favorite, we're all going to have favorites. I've loved Grommets, and that's such a more, I guess, realistic. I don't know if that's necessarily the word, but it's based very, very much in reality.
It's slice of life. It's a lot of, Brian and I got together and talked about a bunch of stories, and then I took those and went and wrote the comic based on these different stories, and then kind of loosely connecting them with fiction threads. And so it's about, 75-80% true stories in there.
Oh, is it? Like some of the stuff, like Rick's talking about co-writing Grommets, folks, with Brian Posehn, and they've worked together on a bunch of different books over the years. Last Christmas, Deadpool. Am I forgetting another one?
I didn't work on Deadpool with Brian. That was
no, you didn't. You did separate Deadpool stuff. I'm sorry.
But
what else
I did.
You guys do together?
We had done the Last Christmas, and then I took X-Force, and everybody enjoyed my Deadpool, and that went really well. So when they were looking for the team of writers, I put my name in the hat for Jerry and Brian to come on. And then, those guys did a wonderful job, I think, with that ridiculousness, and had fun. And
I guess, what I did there is I sort of pushed it all together because, of course, you and Tony had such a long run on Fear Agent, and Tony started off on Deadpool, that I was just sort of like pushing that all
Tony
together.
And I had just done Venom right before that.
Exactly.
And we were, back then we were all hanging out at cons and, pals. And I'm still, I just had dinner with Brian last night.
That's awesome.
We all hang out.
So in Grommets, the characters, like the teenage characters of Rick and Brian, are based largely on real things that happened to you guys?
Yeah. Obvious. Some of the stuff does like era jumping. I don't think that Brian or I at that point, like, he's 56 and I'm 51. So there was like a bit of a like, his 81 was my 86 in terms of where we were at. So we landed on 84, 85, and then kind of amalgamated some of the, the various adventures and tales of that stuff, of what we went through.
I think it just, and maybe it's my age too, I mean, I remember that era, not just skate culture, but just like, kids going around to like 7-Elevens and stuff. And you're just like, yeah, this feels so authentic. The sort of different ways people would go into groups of, jocks and burnouts and stuff like that. It just all feels very real. And a lot of it is super funny too. I mean, it's dramatic and it's funny. It's an interesting balance you guys had to strike there.
I mean, it's a lot of sort of what that was like for us. And I think that we both I think that the sense of humor becomes a defense mechanism of being an outcast and, being messed with and having the kinds of experiences we had growing up. And, I moved every couple of years, and it was all, it was always resetting. And I found that like being funny kind of helped me. It's like all skill sets that we pick up to survive, I think. And so, it was we started working on it in the pandemic, and it was just sort of a cathartic thing, telling each other stories. And then, I collected them and we made the book. And Brett Brett's one of those guys where you can look at it and you go, oh, it's you're in 1984. The first issue is 84. And then we do a time jump in the second to 85 so that the guys are friends. And we kind of, but when you look at the mid 80s through Brett's lens, very few artists could have possibly captured what he did, because every single panel has to exist in 1984-85. And that means the tables, that means the curtains, that means the clothing, that means when you go to the mall, like there's issue 2, they go to the mall, and or issue 3, maybe it's the mall, but either way, he recreates the classic American mall from 1985, which I've become quite nostalgic for, as I've gotten older, because it was sort of our version of the town square, where people came together. sort of, there was a community aspect to it. And
yeah, you'd bump into people, and it was just a place to hang out before we could easily jump online and talk to each other. Yeah, I went to the mall all the time.
It was the only place. Yeah.
And it's so funny in retrospect, before there were like phones and stuff, I'm like, how did my mom, know where and when to pick us up on time? I mean, it obviously worked out, but it's like hard to remember exactly how that worked out back then.
Yeah, I was talking to my kids about that. It was like, oh, well, we used a payphone and we called them for a ride, and maybe we got a ride, or maybe you got your skateboard or your bike and you got to go on a 3-mile trek home. It was, and but my son's 13, and by the time I was his age, it's just such a different world. I realized I was just out and about. Like at 13, I would bail. I would grab my skateboard and I skated to school through downtown Phoenix, which is like 2 miles through traffic. And my parents didn't, we'd go bomb the Phelps Dodge building and skate ramps and get into all kinds of trouble. And, obviously it's completely different, the amount of sort of, freedom. And there's a meme that went around that, I'm old enough that I like some of these memes. And one of it said, Generation X is the first generation that was 30 at the age of 10 and is still 30 at the age of 50. And it's kind of interesting. There's some truth to like we've just always been adultish, but not, but
but a stunted adultishness that wouldn't be,
definitely.
You took your skating pretty seriously when you were younger, huh? You were a pretty serious skater.
Yeah, I mean, I lived it. It was like, for me, I started skating in 5th grade. It would have been 84, and it was before it really broke. It was sort of like, it was freedom. I had 1 or 2 buddies that also picked up on it, and it was just this thing that was like ours. And, when you're listening, there was another State of Mind, and I had bought a VHS of this, and it's a video where the Youth Brigade get together with Social Distortion and they tour, and it's a sort of very, very famous, homemade punk movie. And they visit the Discord house, and that's where Ian MacKaye and Minor Threat lived and made their music. And eventually, Fugazi and Discord Records basically out of there. And they were skating ramps and they were wearing Vans high tops. And it was, back when finding that culture, it was like magic. It was like, what have we found here? And so it started kind of with punk, and then that led to skating and seeing those guys on ramps and seeing that, like, hey, the lead singer from Minor Threat wears Vans high tops, like that. It all just, it's a scene, right? And so when you're that age and you're looking for an identity, that really became kind of, ours. And I was never like, super great at it. I got good enough that, I'd skate ramp and, street, and I skated, in the morning and the evenings.
More than I could do.
I skated like nonstop for like 5 years until I destroyed my ankle, which I had to have surgery on last year and have the whole ankle rebuilt because it finally gave out. But yeah, I loved it. It was freedom. It was like the sport of the outcasts.
And that's sort of where you started with comics too, with Blackheart Billy, right? Like
talking. It was one of my earliest comics. I took my love of the two things, because comic books. Skating the 7-Eleven, and eventually went inside to get a Slurpee, and I saw Secret Wars #4 with the Hulk holding a mountain, and I was like, "That's kid stuff." I'm like 10 or 11, and I was like, "I guess I'll buy it." What's the Hulk doing? I don't know. He seems angry, but I'll pick it up. And I remember reading it and just being like, "All right, you kind of knew who Spider-Man and Captain America were, but there's all these other characters, and then there's history." And I was like, "Oh, I got to find out more." And, within a year, I'm mowing lawns and skating to the comic. Yeah, hooked. And so it was all, my childhood was entirely baked in Robert Williams paintings, Thrasher magazine, skateboarding, and comic books. And I think a lot of that is obviously in the DNA of things like Blackheart Billy and Grommets and Deadly Class. And it definitely makes its way in there.
Oh, thank you, Randy. Somebody wishing a Merry Christmas. I guess, maybe up in Canada, they celebrate Christmas for a month or something. Thank you, Randy. To you too, though, see?
Lucky Randy.
Yeah. No, lucky his kids.
Lucky his kids. Unlucky Randy. Yeah, you're right. Randy's bank account takes the hit.
I could talk about grommets all night, but you've got other books and stuff too, and I've also enjoyed
We'll
the
talk about
Sacrificers.
anything you want, Chris. I got no agenda. But yes,
Oh, okay, okay.
You're a professional.
Well, then let me do one last thing about this. It's about like skaters. You skated, and now I'm like catching up. You mentioned you had kids. Did they try skateboarding? Are they old enough that they're interested?
My daughter tried a few times and it didn't stick. My son skated for like 3 years, was getting really good, like dropping in the bowl and really enjoyed it. And then the pandemic happened and he fell out of that. And during the pandemic, he picked up a guitar, so now he's really into playing guitar. But he never went back, and it didn't. I don't think it had the same sort of the latchkey generation. We were out and about, so having a skateboard was sort of a natural,
I think that's fair.
It was a vehicle to leave. He doesn't leave the house that much, and I guess that's probably because Gen X had so much freedom, and we were so just like, good luck out there.
It is crazy, like how different. Like people are like, I hear stories of kids from the 70s and 80s where they said they just would go out of the house like all day long, and their parents weren't like trying to find them. And I'm like, absolutely, and plenty of my friends were just given a key, and they get home from school, let themselves in, and they like make their own dinner type thing. Like that was just totally normal. Another thing that I think has fallen by the wayside, I never hear about people finding porn in the woods anymore. And that was absolutely a thing that happened.
My buddy Lee about this. Porn in the woods. Try to explain that to a kid. Well, now if you were lucky, there'd be a leprechaun that would leave a magic box or a bag full of pornography. I remember always
it was a thing.
An episode where Danny DeVito had a bag of porn in the woods, and he brought a kid out there to like bribe him with it. And the kid's like, "What is happening?"
So maybe that can be a germ of an idea for your next comic. But there's other comics that I love. We've all talked, like I do weekly like mini reviews of stuff that's come out, and the chat will like talk to me. And I like the Sacrificers. Okay, that's like high fantasy, very different genre, obviously. Really been enjoying it, and a bunch of my viewers were picking up on something that I guess totally went over my head, Rick. They're saying like, oh, this definitely takes place in the same world as 7 to Eternity. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I had an idea for 3 fantasy stories, and Sacrificers is the second. 7 to Eternity was the first. And I always grapple with, like, I always grapple with how much interconnectivity exists in a thing before it becomes. I'm not a fan of like the shared universe for me. A lot of people do it and love it, and it's great, and they can read this, and that character pops up here. For me, I always just said, like, it's HBO from The Sopranos up and through when AMC was doing, Mad Men and Breaking Bad and like that era of television, stories with beginning, middles, and ends. And So yes, this was one of the few times, like I think in Deadly Class or Black Science, Grant ended up in a room where Heath Houston's ray gun and Tokyo Ghost Lead Dense Mask is in there, and it's fun little Easter eggs. But yeah, the idea is that these live, and by the time I get to the third one, when Sacrifices is over, it's possible we'll see a little more interplay with the stories. Okay. But I always wonder if that's. I grapple with it. I grapple with whether or not that's. Is it breaking one story, or does is it? I have to find a way where it's absolutely enriching, but then you're also telling somebody, if you're going to enjoy this third of my fantasy trilogy, you're going to have to also read these other 2 books.
I see what you're saying. You want them to stand on their own.
You do want them
to be additive.
I think that's what's going to. I think that's good for comics. I think comics where if you go into a comic book store and there's a person working there or a store owner who's like, I really love 7 to Eternity, and it's this big giant hardcover by Jerome Opeña with a little James Herron thrown in there. It's all done. We took our time. We did it right. And you can just read it in this big, beautiful brick. I think that's the kind of thing that feeds the sort of binge mentality that we've all got cooked into our brains. The monthly comic, I don't know if there's a lot of youngsters out there that are stoked on like, oh, I get to read 22 pages every 30, 40 days. Whereas
it's a very unique storytelling mechanism. what we've like
Right.
developed.
And I'm never going to stop doing the singles for the single audience, and it also makes me end cap the chapters in a way that I think is a little more responsible. You know, like I'll cut stuff and I'll rearrange things in those chapters. They're hopefully the fat's cut off the bone because of that. I like that. I like the thing. And then when it's all done, you know, and the whole picture is formed, I think it takes a whole new life. Like so. But anyway, yeah, you want them to have a beginning, middle, and an end, and to accomplish that, and hopefully earn the reader's respect and joy where they'll, after, you know, I've been doing this for 27 years, hopefully they dig it enough or trust something else I've done enough to go, well, I don't know what's going on. There's a pigeon and there's a fire god. I don't know. The symbolism will start to emerge, and what I'm saying about the world we live in will hopefully be there, but not be in your face.
Oh, yeah.
There's a million things you're trying to accomplish.
You know what? I just made a video talking specifically about an end of a comic, and it really got me thinking lately about how, you know, primarily because these comics are mostly monthly. That's most of what I'm reading. You know, it's mostly important to me to enjoy the journey, but a strong ending kind of like rewards you for the investment and maybe makes it all feel a little more worthwhile. You know, how much thought are you putting in? You tend to tell very complete stories that have laid out structurally a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of the end before you even like start the thing? Do you have like just a germ of it? Do you have that locked in generally, or is it different? You know, like how much thought do you put into the ending is what I'm talking about.
I generally have the ending. I know what I want to say. I try to, you know, shave off the, like, you know, if it's too, and, you know, you want it to be subtle. You want it to be smart. You want the reader to be filling in the gaps. And so you figure out what you're going to do. You get your outline. You figure out what you're saying. And I don't know, like, you know, there's some people, big writers that I've had.
Hold on. Did Rick just go mute for you guys? Can you hear me, Rick? I'm having trouble with the audio, folks.
But no,
Can't hear Rick. Okay. Oh, there you are. There you are.
Okay.
Sorry, you dropped out for a minute there.
It's fine. I'm using my phone, and it seems to want to come and go. But
no, you're good now. You're good now. I'm sorry, but you had just started your thought.
What was my thought? What were we talking about?
Okay, we were talking about endings, and you said generally you like to be subtle, but you like to be thoughtful. And then you said some other writers might, and then it sort of dropped out.
Yeah. I was talking to a writer who will writing nice, who will write issue by issue and then kind of lay the track in front of them. And I've tried that. I find that it lacks intention. And so, you know, when I'm reading something or somebody's reading a fiction, that's a huge investment. Getting somebody to say, read fiction. It didn't happen, or pieces of it did, but you're asking somebody to join you. You do need to have a sense that they've done enough work.
I'm sorry, Rick. You went mute again. We'll figure it out, folks. Yeah, it's muted.
How about now?
Yeah, now you're good.
Great. I was just trying. It said it was trying to use my phone for the mic, and that was closer to me, so I figured that would be better, but apparently not. So laying the track on an ending as I go, laying the track in general. So what I try to do is get a general idea, have a structure, do the character arcs, write full character bios, and know the world, and then I let myself kind of tell the story based on the outline. But I can veer and change and still enjoy it, so it feels like a living document. But yeah, I do try to tell a beginning, middle, and an end more than.
I think a lot of your endings are super memorable to me. I really thought that Low had a point. You know, I thought that Deadly Class made sense. I don't know. fear agent. It all tied a bow on things. I don't know. These are just things that are popping up off the top of my head. So sure. I think you have, and maybe that's why I keep trying everything. I'm like, Rick has earned my goodwill, because I do think that you end things strong and give a point to it that makes it worth revisiting.
Oh, that means a lot. Like the idea that I think, in the world we live in now, the idea that I'm able to make fiction and comic books and the way I do it, which is, I think a bit different than a lot of what's goes on in the industry, especially now. Anybody reading it and enjoying it, much less the sort of, luck I've had with the audience that I have. I'm always amazed and grateful for it. And that's why the conventions, made it when I was in New York, a couple of, I guess I made it in 2023, and then got to talk to people for the first time. First con I'd done in 5-6 years. I remember going just like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like I forgot that, there were actual people who were ingesting these things and enjoying them, because, the isolation of the game can often sort of disassociate you from that. So yeah, I'm very grateful for you reading them and digging them.
Very much. Image sends me, advanced PDFs. I don't always look at it, but I sometimes I can't resist. I had to look at the seasons right away. Not what I was expecting at all. And that's a good thing. Don't worry. First of all, Paul, is it pronounced Paul Azaceta, or am I
Azaceta? Yeah.
Azaceta. Sorry. You read these things and you don't always know.
I know.
Paul's art I was like, I love it because it's so kinetic, and within that, like, just there's a humor from it, folks, with one or two of the characters. I don't want to spoil the plot or anything, where there was humor coming from like sort of physical comedy and stuff, and I was just like not expecting that in a book that seems to be very dangerous and a little bit fantasy. Like, where'd that humor come from? I just wasn't expecting it.
Well, I think
how much of that was Paul? How much of that was you?
Well, I mean, his beautiful interpretation of the script is obviously him, and the writing of what is happening is me. But we do talk. But it's really a matter of wanting to do a book that had I think that the comps we love to use when we talk together, and the comps that I kind of evoke in terms of what I was ingesting prior to writing it, is very much watching Miyazaki, things like Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke with my kids.
Okay.
And then
I saw that in it.
Comics like Windsor, like what Windsor McKay would do, or Tintin, or High Adventure with kids, and then it has a little Stephen King, it with the kids off on the adventure, but it's a bit of hopefully something unique, and will be a breath of fresh air for readers, because it lives in the small moments, and in comics, living in the small moments is incredibly difficult. Ultimately, what you end up with in comics a lot of time is, still panels, a lot of captions, a lot of information being conveyed without letting yourself sort of soak in the small moments, which one of the things we wanted to do was tell a high adventure story, sort of akin to Fear Agent or Black Science with the adventure aspect, but, in a sort of PG-13 setting that still hopefully has something to say, which I believe it does.
Yeah.
But allowed for us to not get so plot oriented, because there was a version of the first script where I told a lot of what was happening, and and there was captions, and I just sort of set it up, and then the story started, and I was like, well, what if we just spent 40 pages for a first issue and just charge the same money for it? Paul does twice the work. But what if we did that and just followed one character through the world to sort of start picking up what the rules of the world were? And it's the classic show, don't tell, but of course that's quite difficult in comics, because somebody has to draw every single moment. So all of those little moments, those small moments we lived in, they're a delight for me. And that delight comes from, allowing Paul to take a really simple thing where this young girl, Spring Seasons, is trying to chase a letter that seems almost magically pulled away from her through this town.
Yeah.
But in the chasing of the letter, we meet some of the other characters. We get the rules of the world without it being sort of. So then in the second issue, anyway. So the idea is to just take a breath. This isn't, this is a very different tonality from a lot of things that I've done, and allow the readers to go on an adventure and in a story where I don't want people to know what's happening. I give away the one thing, which is, what if you were offered a relic that would allow you to see the world exactly the way you want? Only once you did, you could never see it for how it was. And you get into the sort of Indiana Jones high adventure stuff, but with these 4 sisters, the Season sisters, who are all children and orphans of these world famous adventurers who've gone missing. And so, you feel that the sort of the Tintin and then the Miyazaki with the sort of Faustian aspect and the kind of, something wicked this way comes business there in the background. But ultimately, we're talking about some. I think when people get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th issue, you see that there's a modern relevance to it, I hope.
Okay. I loved it, and I could see that. I was really impressed with the storytelling, honestly. Like, you're right. It takes you through the world. You get to meet like who the characters are, how the sort of town is laid out, things along those lines, without it just being an exposition drop. It's very charming. And it wasn't what I was expecting, because from the solicitations, I got the sense that this was about, like a crime story of just like a murder investigation. I thought it was going to be way darker.
The thing about darkness is that if darkness is relative. So if I go into a horror movie and in the first scene there's a disembowelment and, gore, there's no emotional impact. And I also go into a horror movie kind of knowing that it's going to get to that point. I like to set things up in stories where hopefully the kinds of things that are going to be frightening, or the kinds of things that someone might find horrific, are going to be surprising and actually have an effect because you've lived in a different world. And we open up in a day of the life of the youngest of the 4 Season sisters, and that's Spring, as she is doing her job as a letter courier, and a letter that came for her just keeps getting pulled out of her hands. And again, like Autumn is the Indiana Jones sort of high adventure. She is the archaeologist, but for the supernatural. And that's Spring's older sister. The original issue 1 was all about Autumn and this great adventure she goes on looking for her parents that ends up unearthing and releasing some of the things that we saw in the current version. But having started the work on this in 2020 and have that much time to live in it and live in the story and get your eyes on it and kind of edit, I was able to go, oh, actually, no, the story should hint at Autumn's adventure, but it should just be Spring getting the letter her sister sends her. And then we'll catch up on anyway. So yeah. And look, Paul's on issue 7 now. Paul is at like, he's at like Alex Toth level. We're like heavily.
Yeah. That's such a great touch point. Like, by the way, when I look at Paul's work, Alex Toth, I totally see that.
Paul's there. I mean, the Gen Xers who gave their life, like, I feel like our generation is there, where like the people who are still the crafts, and you look at, Mateus Lopez and the colors, and you look at what's going on there, and you're like, oh, there's very few people who can do that. And Definitely. The risk to do something where, Paul and I have 2 books we want to do, and one of them is very commercial and already has a big A-list actor attached to it, and it would be, but this one was the one that kept kind of gnawing at us to tell this kind of story, because it's that David Bowie thing of swimming in the waters that are a little too deep, going out of your comfort zone and trying new things and experimenting. And it wouldn't work without what Paul and Mateus are doing there in the art, because
you have some great collaborators. You always do with every Giant Generator project. And I'm going to loop back to that in 2 seconds. I just wanted to say, Paul had a great appearance this past week on Ink Pulp Live. I don't know if you got to see any of it, but he was just drawing live with Jim Mahfood and Sean Crystal, and it was really, really fun to watch him, just like, his process and like hear from him and stuff. It was really charming and interesting and engaging. Great work.
Paul's a sweetheart and just an amazing talent, and getting something like this going in the way we've done it and taking 3 years to do 7 issues before we launch, to just take a
Good
breath.
for you.
Take a breath.
That's something I appreciate. Every once in a while, I know sometimes you might take a brief hiatus to sort of like catch up and just make sure that, like, say, the same artist like can continue. But I appreciate that you don't just start something and then all of a sudden it falls off and gets delayed. I really appreciate, like, you've done a great job on that.
We try not to. It's difficult when you have like a Jerome Opeña or a Greg Tocchini or guys who are so high level great, but the work they're doing, or what Paul's doing in Seasons, these 7 issues have taken 2 years. It's difficult
it's nice to fit that in.
It's the American, the monthly comic book grind doesn't allow for high art anymore, but it's also kind of maybe eroding it a little. And so by taking our time and taking a few years and building it up, we can make something that, when there's 13, 14 issues and we do a big hardcover of it and it's, just Paul and Mateus bleeding all over every page, it becomes special. And that love forms a gravity center that does, I think, make it evergreen, which is why, I pay my bills based on these books just keep selling. And making evergreen books that are given this much love, I think, is the only way to do that.
That's encouraging. I agree. Like, the monthly thing can be an impediment to, say, evolving your art and stuff like that. And at the same time, if you look at how much detail and care and thought is being put into even just like compositions and character designs, what we do these days is radically different than what we did like 30 years ago or 60 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, the amount of information that an artist is sort of asked to convey keeps going up while we've locked ourselves into a certain schedule.
Yeah, you can't. And so I've sort of just made my bones, and you can't do it. You can't do a monthly schedule and then say you're going to do 24 issues with the same artist giving their life, over to this thing. And so the other version of it is you start it years in advance, give everybody the time they need. We have 7 issues in, we'll do the first 4 issues are all like between 26 and 40 pages. So they're all huge issues, trying to give the consumer and the fans and the people who still support us a bunch of love.
Yeah.
And hopefully that'll keep them engaged and ultimately.
So is that some of the Giant Generator philosophy to like get it up and ready to go before you start soliciting? Is that part of the plan, or is that a you thing?
Well, I mean, Giant Generator is just my imprint. It's just, me and the guys and gals that we work with to make stuff. So, I mean, but I have, so all the current books, the 2020, in 2020, all is when we started all the current books. So it was Sacrificers, Napalm Lullaby, Grommets, Sacrifice,
Seasons.
Thank you. So a Holy Roller. I started working with Sandberg and those guys on that. And so, we gave it 3 years to gestate and do the best we could. And now the next wave of Giant Generator books, and also, curating things like helping J.G. Jones make Dust to Dust, and, taking an idea in a Bible I had and giving it to a writer who I like a lot, Peter Warren, and having him go and unpack it into something completely amazing with Tin Can Society. And that stuff took years and years to build, but more importantly is looking at the art, what Brett is doing, what all these artists are doing in all these books is the work of their career to date. And that does take allowing yourself the time to do it, and then taking a wild swing and hopefully, making something that stands the test of time.
I want a Grommets animated show. Can you get that out to me by the end of this year?
I've been working on a cartoon of one of my books for 5 years now. And it's at a network. It has been fully developed now. I'm show running it. It is a major undertaking. It's very competitive market, and major undertaking. So yeah, I mean, who knows what happens with Gromits? Yeah, I get to a point with the book stage, I just focus on the book, because if I start thinking film television brain, having done so much film television, I'll hear notes or execs or what's producible, or is this going to fit this? I kind of know what everybody's buying habits are now. I know everybody in town, so is Apple going to look for something in this bucket? And I think Amazon's looking for something in that bucket, and you could inadvertently change the thing to kind of change it.
Yeah, and that's a compromise. Those aren't always. Yeah.
And I don't want to change. I want to make the books exactly purely how we want to make the books, and then I'll figure out sort of the media play.
I still say that, folks, go find Deadly Class. It was a strong adaptation. I mean, there were some changes made, but it really fit the medium so well. I really wish that show was still going, of course, but it was a great adaptation, and I'm excited to see whatever comes next. The comics is always what I prefer the most. I enjoy the occasional comic book show or movie. I still like comics the most, but I'm always curious about an adaptation. So I am excited to see what Giant Generator starts doing in that realm. That's exciting.
They've been very surgical, making sure that we're only working with the very best people. And
that helps.
Having had one of my books kind of ruined in an adaptation, not Deadly Class, but something else. I take
that one. You're not saying that one was ruined, right? You're talking about.
No, I'm very proud of
Deadly Class.
I love Deadly Class. And,
it was great. I think I know the one you're talking about, but I don't want to be negative.
No, that was a huge heartbreak. I love that, I guess the point, without being negative, was to say that I'm very, very selective and careful. None of the things that, I'm adapting my own work, or else it's just not going to happen. I'm not really interested in letting other people kind of take it and manhandle it.
Well, I don't know how exactly you manage it all. We've talked before about your work schedule and stuff. I still don't know how you manage it all. Is there anything else you can tell us that's coming out in the near future from Giant Generator, or is right now Seasons what we can know about?
Seasons is the next one, but after 2020, when the current lineup started 2020-21, and then I put together another 5 projects for the next wave when these are finished. And we've got the next round is this thing that Daniel Acuna has been painting for years now, which is I wish I could talk about it, but what Acuna's been doing on this.
That's a nice, exciting hint. Just telling us Daniel Acuna.
Yeah,
I thought his book that he did with Marvel this year about the Avengers in the future was actually just absolutely gorgeous, and I was like, "Boy, I need to see more."
He's one of the best.
That was one of Marvel's best. Very underrated. Yeah.
And this is him outside of the Marvel wheelhouse that people have been sort of accustomed to, and doing something more. A lot like the Seasons, something that is inspired by a number of European artists that he loves, and as a Spaniard with a lot of other tastes that aren't just the American flavors. So the Acuna book, Yannick Paquette and I have been working for 3 years now on a horror book.
And
he's on issue 4 or 5, I think. Acuna's on issue 4. Greg Tocchini is painting our next project, and so that's taking some time. And then Dave McKaig's coming in and helping him. And we've got Steve Epting and I are doing a Grindhouse. You've got Andre Lima Araujo and I are doing a Western. I've got my next 3 years kind of blocked out, and then beyond that, obviously, Seasons will be running and Sacrifices will be running. And
dude, I got goosebumps as you started listing these artists and stuff and the genres. Thank you for the hint.
Yeah, and then Zeb Wells just signed on to write a book for the line.
I did see rumors of that. That's exciting.
Got some other folks that we're talking to. So, and I don't take anything. I don't take ownership or participation or media or anything. The books that I'm doing that starting with Dust to Dust, that I'm helping people that are, collaborators, that, friends and professionals who I love, like J.G. Jones. It's just an effort to try to help them make sure that we make something beautiful.
that great. I love hearing it. You're telling me the right things. Here's my money. I'm feeding it through the camera. That's a thing I can do now. I hope I get to see. I hope I get to bump into you at a convention sometime in the future, Rick. I miss the Jesus. If I think all of a sudden about when we would have met, it's now over 20 years ago.
I think it was 2005 at Chicago.
Either 4 or 5, but maybe 5. Yeah. So
yeah,
that was a pretty silly year. We got silly that year, folks.
Was Fear Agent out? I was there promoting Fear Agent. So that was.
I don't think it was out, but I think that the promo images were out, which I think early on there were definitely some by Tony, and I think that back then there were some by Corey Walker, even if I'm remembering right.
Corey was originally going to rotate, and so Corey and Tony. There's an ash can out there that has half Tony for 8 pages, and then Corey for 8 pages, and
wild to think about.
Yeah, he ended up getting busy and couldn't do it, and I was obviously very lucky that Jerome could because. Oh
yeah. Because you and Jerome have gone on to do so many great things together, so that's an awesome partnership. And I won't get you in trouble, but folks, we had paper pie masks that we were making that night in the hotel lobby, and Rick did something unspeakable to one of them. Unspeakable. I'll just leave it at that.
I think I fed it.
Yeah, I don't know how you would word that. What you yeah. It's okay. We're good.
I said it's something, and then Tony Moore was doing a sketch with a mechanical pencil, and he stuck his mechanical pencil at the thing I fed the plate.
It was a good time. But I just miss seeing you in person, dude. I've been really enjoying your work. I appreciate you taking some time to talk to all of us about what's coming up and about the process. It's always interesting chatting.
I love talking.
Always interesting.
So much. Okay, thanks, dude.
I'm about to dude, just real quick. I'm about to talk about some of my favorite books of the year. Is there anything that stands out that it doesn't have to be your number one or anything, but one of your favorite books this year? Anything that you'd recommend to people just as a recommendation?
I think there's a number of things, but I think what Kieran Gillen is doing on his new Image book is great.
Okay.
I haven't read it yet, but I heard the story for Jason Aaron's Bug Wars, and I think that's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, with Mahmoud Asrar on art, sounds great. I'd love to see him cut loose on something that isn't Marvel. Just see what he does. Yeah,
and I think that'll be this. Yeah, I think it was one of those concepts that were oh, okay, all right, yeah, that sounds really fun. So
cool.
Yeah.
Just looking for recommendations. Hey, my best to you and your family for the new year. Thanks for taking some time, Rick. Have a good night.
Appreciate it. Thanks, dude.
Bye. All right. Sorry if I talked too long or was too gushing. I think Rick's amazing. He's just one of my favorites, and I'm always going to gush over people that I appreciate. Power Fantasy. I've heard a lot of people tell me that that's fantastic. I haven't read it yet. I haven't read everything. So in a moment, I'm about to do my top 10 for all of you. Keep in mind, it's out of what I've read. So it's not meant to be definitive. It's more just meant to be recommendations of things I'd say that people could enjoy. Moon is Following Us has been interesting. Bug Wars, very promising. Very promising. I'm glad that you think so. I love getting to, peek into somebody's creative process. Tell us your power fantasy. I believe I would love to have the power to afford my mortgage without thinking about it. Inconceivable. You talk too much, Chris. That was my perfect impression of, what was the actor's name? The joke fell apart. Last Mermaid. We might be talking about that tonight. Rare Flavors. If that was this year, that one definitely flew over my head. Let me get started with the next segment here, folks. I'm going to add a little document here. Wallace Shawn, thank you, the Beowulf. Yep, thank you, Wally Gropius. Lovely. Wallace Shawn, yes. Once again, nailing it with a perfect thumbnail. I should hire a pro. All right. first, I just want to share some personal stuff. I'm going to be a guest on the West Coast DAVEngers live claim sale this Thursday, and I need some of your feedback in a second, folks. So, Thursday, January 2nd, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Dave does these claim sales. He'll have maybe 30, 40 books priced at different amounts. Some of them are like, low end, like rapid fire. A bunch of them will be sort of like both minor and major keys. I don't need this in my head anymore. Always a fun claim sale. It's not a bidding thing. You just, if you're interested, if you're the first one to claim it, boom, you get it. So I definitely recommend that show. And Dave's local, and we were like, well, let's do something fun to get together. So I'm going to be there, maybe just like help out reading the chat and taking notes, but also I'll have some trivia about the comics that Dave is putting up. And I'm also going to offer up 3 pieces of original art from me for claim. And I'm going to ask you guys if you have any big opinions on the next slide. Like I'm showing some pieces that I could potentially put up that people could claim. We'll like do mostly comics, and then every once in a while put up a piece of my art. And maybe if any of you want to watch the show and try to claim an original piece of art, boom, you can get it. I'll be doing trivia through the night if I didn't mention that. And the winners of the trivia at the end of the night, whoever gets the most right, Dave's going to like tell you at the beginning of the show a certain comic that you could win. I'm going to show a piece of artwork of mine. You can just win by answering the most right. We'll do it remotely, and we will both be on screen, and so will the comics and art I ship worldwide. So there we go. Remotely. I'll just sort of be here going like, I'm here on the screen too, Dave. That's what I'll talk like. Let's see. And there's a link, but you can also just look up on YouTube, West Coast DAVEngers. So, dibs on Chris's hentai art. That's all for me. So over here, I've got like some of the sketches and doodles I've like done here and there. And hold on, I thought that I could like resize this. So this little piece here of the 2 Jason Voorhees, this was art that was used on Trash Movie Bonanza for the thumbnail. That'll be the piece that I'm willing to give away for free to whoever gets questions right, okay? And then out of these pieces, I'm going to select 3 pieces, okay? So there's like a Darth Vader. This is Nosferatu Zod from the manga Berserk. I've got 2 different roadblocks that I inked on this show. Ciri from The Witcher. This is a weird stain on the paper, like some chips fell on it, but, whatever, it's a sketch. There's a Leonardo that got cropped here, and a Gamera that was also used as thumbnail art for Trash Movie Bonanza. So 3 of these I'll pick to like have on the claim sale. But the Jason one will be sort of a prize for somebody that just watches and answers a bunch of questions, right? Okay. So yeah, free stain, or I could cut it if somebody's like, no, I don't want the paper to have that. The chip stains only heighten the rarity. They can't see the art. The art is up there. So anyway, Ciri you vote for should be one of them. Be willing to include that. I put it up on my social media post too. Just want to get a sense of what people might be interested in. And, I figure out of like, Dave's going to do roughly a 2-hour show. So maybe every 30 minutes or so, we could just put up a piece of my art. And if somebody wants to claim that, lucky me. So just giving you a heads up. That you could also win one for free. So Vader will sell. Okay. A couple people like that. Whoops. Darth. The stain, if it's scented, it's potato chip flavor. Like literally a potato chip fell on the page and I didn't notice. And this will like sort of gross you out. It just like stayed there for, I don't know, a couple days. And like this grease just sort of like grew. It sucked that out of a regular ass potato chip. So the Gamera has a lot of detail to it. Anyway, some of them obviously like not quite finished. They're more sketches. Some of them have like some pencil marks. I was just going to do it as is, but that's coming up. So How about some comic book news of the week? Jason Momoa will play Lobo. I think that makes sense. So specifically today, actor Jason Momoa confirmed on Instagram, and it was further confirmed by trade publications from Hollywood like Deadline, that, yeah, the DCU has cast Momoa to play Lobo, and he will specifically appear, wasn't in the comics, but he will be in the movie Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Thoughts? I feel like it makes sense. I feel like he's got the look. He could play Lobo. Absolutely. My friend Tony Moore had a funny comment. He says, even though Momoa is fit and everything, I think that James Gunn should make him wear huge, oversized arms so that he has Simon Beasley proportions. Is he big in Japan? Makes sense. Nice. He's too chubby for you? Okay. Good fit. Aquaman is villain. Blah. Okay, well, he doesn't like it. Fraggin' Bastiche. Good casting, not an interesting character. I think Lobo works well as a supporting character and sometimes as a comedy, like sort of one-shot type thing. Anyway. Should have been the bad guy in the new Superman. Well, maybe he still will be someday. Nice. Anyway, so that was all the comic book news of the week, folks. I'm not kidding. That was all the news I really had to share with you. And now we're going to go into the top 10 comics of the week with, I just want to plug one other thing. So over on my other channel, which is called Comic Tropes, I did an episode about the end of The Walking Dead, and it's doing pretty well. Could be doing better, but it's doing pretty well. I think that even if you haven't read the comic, there's something you can get out of it because it's talking about endings. And it's been 5 years since this book ended, so I think that the statute of limitations has run out, and I'm allowed to talk in depth about what happens in the final issues, which I do. But I don't talk about every subplot or every twist to the story either. Right? But it does talk about the overall plot. So I would encourage you to check that out, hopefully. So my plugs are done. Let's talk about the best comics of the year. How do I get this up here? Add to stage. You know what? Let me... Oh, that didn't work. Okay. I'll do it like this. I would say that we're still pals, but I wouldn't say that we talk that much, to be honest. He's pretty darn busy between his work obligations and family, so we don't talk a whole lot anymore, to be honest. But if I saw him in person, I feel like, yes, we would still have a fun conversation and have a good time. We'd never had a falling out. He just got very big and very busy. I think Robert's a great guy. Again, I just sort of qualify this, that this is out of what I read. Also, I'm going to say that this top 10 list is not really in a ranked order for what it's worth. It's more just like these are 10 comics that I wanted to talk about, plus I'll have an honorable mention slide. We'll get to it. Can't believe humans were the Walking Dead the whole time. I always thought that they were going to turn out to be orcas, killer whales, mutated by space alien lasers. But no, they were people. All right. First one, Transformers. When you look at everything that came out within this book in 2024, there were some killer issues. Among those moments that were really cool, Optimus Prime getting a new arm, and that new arm was Megatron's arm. Where's Megatron? The rest of the Transformers don't know, but his arm was like on the ship that they all crashed in. And when Optimus Prime lost an arm, Ratchet got to work and gave him a new arm, and now he runs around with Megatron's gigantic-ass cannon. Obviously, Daniel Warren Johnson writes it. He also drew a bunch of the issues through issue 12. That included really cool moments like Optimus using the Matrix of Leadership, some really strange stuff that happened with the human characters regarding the Matrix. There were great moments once Jorge Corona took over on art, like basically the rise of Starscream to leadership, his fall by getting like absolutely demolished by Soundwave, and then in more recent issues, his return as he sort of has gathered a bunch of Decepticons that don't quite agree with the way things have been going. There were great moments like Optimus Prime ready to sacrifice himself to save Earth specifically, and then unexpectedly getting rescued by Beachcomber. Who would expect such an obscure character? Anyway, what I'm going to say is this is some great artwork, and it has some moments of true heart. It does not overwhelm you by jamming dozens of new characters every issue. They definitely cycle some in. They kill some off too. But they do a great mix of unexpected characters and then build them up to have believable motivations and personalities. I know it sounds wild to say that a licensed book based on toys is like great, but it really is a great, great book. Oh my God, Beachcomber's story is absolutely amazing. Soundwave is still like sort of clinical and a tactician, but he's really strong, just really good. Oh, if you have not been into Transformers before, this is a totally fresh continuity, and it takes its inspiration from stuff that's happened in the past, but it's a totally new story starting from the ground. Very easy to understand who these characters are. There's no references to things that you got to know aside from the comic. Even though it's in a shared universe, it all takes place in this comic. Very easy to follow. The suplex, there was a great suplex. Actually, now that I think of it, sorry. Jazz did give a more of a DDT to Soundwave this year. The great suplex was 2023. That's why I didn't include it. Yeah. Ground level. Don't need past books, past shows, past movies, past toys. You don't need any of that. You can just enjoy this for what it is, and it's good. It's really fun. Really fun. Next one I'm going to recommend, and it's probably not for everybody, but I have adored reading Don to Don. And yeah, it's high school kids. It's about friendship. It's about first romances. And beyond that, it's just got some wild ass shit when it comes to both aliens and not ghosts, more spirits, right? And some of these kids have gotten powers, but from yokai for various weird reasons and stuff like that. I think that Momo Ayase, the main character, is just a really strong lady. She's just a teenager, but she's definitely the main character. Although the book is sort of a two-hander because her friend, who she calls Okaran, their burgeoning friendship is great. But sometimes, for instance, down here in this lower corner, this is a 2-page spread in the manga of basically a robot suplexing a kaiju into all these buildings. The amount of detail that you see in the actual pages is incredible. So a lot of the comedy is very intimate, and then some of the action gets humongous. I think that the artist and writer, Yokonobu Tatsu, really charming. The humor probably isn't for everybody because, for instance, Okarun loses his testicles to a spirit in the first chapter of this book, and it's sort of about him reclaiming those. So anyway, it's weird. The thing that some people object to is that there can be very they say that it's explicit content in this, folks, and they don't have any nudity. They don't, but sometimes the characters will be going through their adventures and end up in their underwear. That's kind of rare, but that kind of stuff can happen, and some people object to that because they're teenagers and stuff. And I'm yeah, but nobody's having sex. Nobody's getting naked. It's whatever. Japan's a little different too, so it fits within their cultural norms. I think it's funny. I think that the action is amazing, and I just like these characters. I believe in them, and I kind of want to see them get together. I'll also say that the anime adaptation, really smooth animation, looks really good, and that opening credits both the theme song and the wild animation styles. It's an incredible opening. Super catchy song by the band Happy Nuts. It's a Japanese band. Yeah, it's a bit risque at most. At most. So much influence from tokusatsu in this series. Absolutely. But honestly, this has a lot of references, to be clear. You don't have to get them, but it can add to your enjoyment if you know things like Ultraman, Godzilla, Gundam, and other things along those lines. It can really help you enjoy it. All the best adventures end up in your underwear. I recommend it is all I can say. And God, I've watched and listened to that opening animation and theme song. That opening animation has tons of references in it too. And it's just wildfire, but it's so artistic. So artistic. Love it, love it, love it. I got to give it to Ultimates. You know, I gave a lot of thought to, out of things like absolute DC stuff and ultimate Marvel stuff, I didn't want to list 2 or 3. I wanted to just pick my favorite of that sort of small line that Marvel and DC have each done. For Marvel, it was close. I think that Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men are fantastic. I really do. But Ultimates is my personal favorite. Ultimates is, you know, a new universe with a new group of Avengers, and it's a very diverse mix. I think that this is a much more positive and hopeful take on the superheroes than the original Ultimate Universe. You know, we were coming out of 9/11 and things were kind of bleak, and Mark Miller's tough dialogue and, you know, really kind of cruel heroes were of their time. But this Ultimates is way more nuanced and of the day. You know, like when the new She-Hulk, for instance, is from somewhere in the Polynesian Islands where various gamma bombs were tested, and her people all sort of became more disabled from the mutations. She's the only one that sort of benefited and became strong, and she feels an obligation and a closeness to stay there on the island and help her people. So while the Ultimates are like, look, you know, you could protect the world and stuff, she's like, I want to specifically, I feel a responsibility to stay here and protect these people. The new Hawkeye is pretty incredible. And one of the villains they go up against is the Hulk, and it's a Hulk who's mastered the Iron Fist as well. So you've never seen a Hulk this dangerous. He's smart, stronger than anybody, and he's mastered various martial arts. Well, that's a very fair argument. Avengers Twilight. Avengers Twilight was fantastic. Avengers Twilight, if you don't know, could be summed up best as maybe Kingdom Come in the Marvel universe, but I think it does end even more hopeful than that. But it's in a future where Red Skull has tricked everybody, and, you know, he's masquerading as I don't know, he's in disguise, so is all that's important. And all the superheroes have been outlawed and rounded up, and an older Steve Rogers, Captain America, is not okay with the way the world is, and he strikes back, and he slowly gathers together a new Avengers team of both new and old allies, and it's very positive and hopeful and cool. Steve, you're never late. You're always exactly on time. Thank you for the super chat. Chip Zdarsky, Daniel Acuna, you know, let's just say at least an honorable mention. If I sat down and thought about it, it could easily also just be part of my top 10. So I'm super grateful that you guys mentioned it, because, yeah, it's really good. And it's its own story. You don't have to know any specific continuity. It's its own story. Avengers Twilight definitely does get 2 thumbs up as well. But I think Ultimates, what's cool about Ultimates is every issue has been about something a little different. And writer Dennis Camp is taking his time with the world building. You know, they didn't just like put all of the characters together and then instantly have them go up against a series of bigger and bigger threats. You know, it's assembling the team, it's understanding what this world is, and it's not overwhelming you with information. It's a really fun journey. It's a really fun journey so far. Anyway, I'm going to, oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, She-Hulk was definitely one of the strongest additions to this book, in my opinion. But also they've got a great take on Ant-Man and Wasp, who is a very healthy couple in this. And also, you know, the Ant-Man in this, Hank Pym, is aware of how things went in the mainstream continuity, where he became, you know, like kind of crazy when he was Yellow Jacket, for instance, how he created Ultron, how he hid his wife, and he doesn't want to be that person. So he's a very reluctant hero because he doesn't want to become that. And that's actually to his benefit. It's really good. What gets me with Ultimates is Camp bringing a Hickman world to life. We've never really seen other people work in his worlds before. A little bit with 3 Worlds, 3 Moons, though. A little bit, but I know what you mean. Yeah. Another recommendation. Look, I don't think that there was any way I couldn't include this, although there's a lot to talk about here. My favorite thing is Monsters Book 2. You're going to get a more complete story if you read both. But the second volume completes the story and does tell its own story within it. So it's a huge, huge book. Emile Ferris just got knighted by the French government for the creation of this book. What kind of stuff does it talk about? You know, it's all illustrated on what seems to be, you know, like notepad paper with ballpoint pens. Some of it is like more cartoony and impressionistic, and the main character, Karen, draws herself as a monster. It deals with maybe her first romance with this girl, Shelley. It deals with her mother has died, and now her older sort of maybe gangster brother, Dees, is taking care of her, but he is good to her, and he loves art. He takes them to the museum in Chicago. There's a lot of Chicago history baked into this book. There's also a murder mystery. Their neighbor was this older Jewish woman who Dees may have been having an affair with, and someone killed her. We don't know who. Karen investigates along with Shelley, and they uncover like her journals and audio tapes and stuff. And this her neighbor talks about how she survived the Holocaust. So it's telling a bunch of things, but it's a big epic story. The art is honestly incredible sometimes. Just incredible. Yes, sleeper pick. Yeah, good. I'm glad so many people are on the same page. It's really something special, folks. It's I don't know how to describe it. You know, every once in a while, there's just a book that will stand the test of time. That people refer to, I think, as a cultural touchstone within comics. I think that some examples could include like Mouse or Watchmen. There's older and more recent things. But I think my favorite thing is Monsters may end up being one of these touchstones that you hear people talk about when they talk about the literary merit of comics. Big and intense. Great. I hope you got 16 million views. I'm struggling to get 20,000. There was a small lawsuit where Emile was arguing that she had only agreed to have them do the first book, and they said, no, you agreed to do all of it, but they did resolve everything out of court, and Fantagraphics did publish the whole thing. Look, this was my top book when I did the top 10 horror of the year, so it would be really weird if it didn't somehow make it into just like top 10 overall books. Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees is a really effective crime thriller story, told, yes, with like Richard Scarry-esque cuddly animals. And if you like cat and mouse games where there's very clever people sort of trying to uncover the other, that's ultimately what this book is. It's about a serial killer who has hidden for and done, you know, the killings very successfully for a very long time, and then another serial killer comes into town and is nowhere near as careful. And of course, that risks upsetting the balance and turning the authorities onto the first serial killer. So now they're sort of butting heads, initially quietly, and things escalate. It's great. It's great, like believable characters. It's very strange to sort of be rooting for the bad guy. But if you've ever seen a show like, I don't know, Dexter or something, that, you know, sometimes that's what we do. Like, it's interesting to at least follow the character, even if you don't agree with what they do. So yeah, it's great. It is occasionally gory. Mostly it's about the chase and being careful and stuff, but it is about serial killers, which just means that the cute sort of animal characters just sort of heighten that bizarre difference where you start to feel very happy and calm and relaxed with this town full of vibrant characters that all interact and have different jobs and different relationships, and then there's some killing going on. The main character does kill, yes. Not a good person that you are rooting for, per se. It's just that sometimes there are things that are even worse. And you're just curious, like, okay, if they get caught, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but how are they going to escape, like, you know, the precarious situation they've gotten into before? Yeah, it's really good. Things escalate all right. Hey, thank you. I recommend Left Turns by Joshua Ross. I don't think I know about that one, Steve, but your $2 super chat is much appreciated and means that I'm more likely to think about it. Thank you. Thank you. Right up your alley. Crazy story. It's crazy. Hugely successful. There will be a sequel, and there's definitely more to tell in this world, but don't worry, this tells a complete story, and I would say it has a satisfying conclusion. I think that the trade just came out, if I'm remembering right. I was getting it as monthly issues, so I didn't follow that news super closely. In your top 10 as well? Thank you. Appreciate the backup. Support. The ending, yeah. Solid ending. Trade is out. Thank you, Steve, for the confirmation. Appreciate that. I've heard good things about Where Monsters Lie. Moving on. Out of the Absolute books, I've enjoyed them all. Absolute Batman was the first and has some amazing, great, really cool stuff in it. I love it. But I wanted to choose my personal favorite, and if I was honest with myself, it's definitely this new version of Wonder Woman, who has the same sort of ethos of compassion and forgiveness and is an incredible warrior, but has a very different origin. This one, all the Amazons were killed, and she was sent to literal hell, you know, the sort of the Greek version of hell. And this is just like one little scene that sort of shows her innocence and stuff. There's like this tiny little dragon that breathes fire on her. Of course, she's super powered, so it doesn't really hurt her. And she grabs it and tells it, no, 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 and then gives it a little kiss on the head. This is a book where she has the same great relationship with Steve Rogers and makes an incredible sacrifice for him in issue 3. I won't spoil what that is, but we are going to talk a little later tonight about issue 3. And she also has redeemed one of her biggest villains, Cersei, who basically becomes her mother in this and doesn't want to be, but Wonder Woman changes her for the better. And what that means is that she's grown up with a mother who is an expert at magic. So she's got a bag of weapons. She's got a different type of a lasso. This is Pegasus, who went to hell and has now escaped with her. And she goes up against gigantic threats. Look at this thing, the Tetracide. Just for point of reference, imagine like the Santa Monica Pier with like, you know, the Ferris wheel and stuff. That's like what's in scale here. This is just Wonder Woman's head. And this gigantic Cthulhian, Lovecraftian beast comes out of the fog and ocean and threatens the world. Love so much about this. Love it, love it, love it. Did I say Steve Rogers? My apologies. Steve Trevor. That said, you know what? Wonder Woman and Steve Rogers would probably be a good match for each other. But I am talking about Steve Trevor. My apologies. Wonder Woman is so cool. And you know what? Like, I'll just say, so awesome. Like, great story by Kelly Thompson. I've been talking about the story. But the art by Hayden Sherman is like superstar making in a way. Hayden Sherman has done some great books that I've talked up in the past that I loved, like Wildfires with Scott Snyder. This is what's going to put Hayden on people's map. It's great storytelling. Really, really solid. The Tetracide. There's a recommendation for another book, Dawn Runner. Appreciate these recommendations, folks. Happy to highlight them. I'm almost always going to put an Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips book in my recommendation for the end of the year because their crime books just work for me. One of the reasons I really like this one, Houses of the Unholy, was it deals with something that I grew up with. Earlier tonight, Rick and I were talking about being Gen Xers, growing up in the 80s and stuff. In the 70s and 80s, there was legit something called a satanic panic, where the news and parents were always concerned that there were like these Satanist cults that were like looking to corrupt you and stuff. Well, this book deals with, all of a sudden, hold on, I'm blanking on the main character's name. Well, she went through like basically some guidance counselors and teachers and stuff worrying that one of the teachers was involved in a cult. And they sort of convinced these little kids, including this girl, to testify against her. None of it was real, though. And now as an adult, you know, she recovers like people that have like gotten into cults, like recovers them for parents and stuff. And she ends up in a big mystery where like maybe one of her childhood friends has gone missing. And there's actually like a real cult going on. And it might involve her brother, some of like her former classmates. It gets weird. I can't tell too much without giving away the story because this is a crime story with weird twists and turns. It's dark. It talks about something really cool. It just works. It's so good. Yeah. Totally like a modern day Salem witch trials. And like what would happen if somebody as a kid sort of went through that and then grew up? Like obviously it would make them a little weird. Not like ruin them per se, but it would ruin some aspects of them. Brubaker, love him. This was great. It was so good. Gonna push back that Houses of the Unholy was disappointing. Okay. It worked for me. And it has a very different type of ending. I'll call it a little ambiguous, but it worked for me within this context. They are a great team. They're my favorite team. Yes, thank you. That's how I interpreted it. Let's see. I can't find this locally. May go to Amazon. Loved Where the Body Was also a fantastic one this year. And to be clear, they did two great crime books, okay? Houses of the Unholy is the darker of the two. It deals with satanic cults. Where the Body Was is more about relationships and kind of like misunderstandings. And honestly ends a little funny. So I came close to saying that one as well. Look, you can't go wrong with Brubaker Phillips, okay? The other book they released this year is also fantastic, to be clear. But I wanted some variety in my recommendations, so I chose one. That's more of what I'm doing here is recommendations, to be clear. I hope that makes sense. Just got it? Good. Good un-Led Zeppelin song. Where the Body was about where the body was at. It was to a degree. I do know that Somna was on your list. Somna was on my top 10 horror list. Didn't quite make this, but I would certainly call it an honorable mention and could conceivably be in this top 10 list. I just need to rejigger it so that there's a good variety of stuff. But it was a really strong book. Tula Lotay, right? That was, am I remembering? Got it right over there. Anyway, Somna is really, really cool. Somna was Becky Cloonan and Tula Lotay, right? Oh, it may have. It was the first one of the, like, it was before Houses of the Unholy. Maybe it was all the way back. Friday is so good. Brubaker has never disappointed me. I've talked this one up a bunch this year. One of my absolute favorites, The Last Mermaid by Derek Kirk Kim, because it's unlike any other book that I'm reading right now. I can point to some reference points. You know, it's got sort of an animated style to it. It's got some manga tropes. It's got some post-apocalyptic Mad Max vibes. But it's such its own thing. It is about a post-apocalyptic world, our world, as you can see by, like, you know, the Golden Gate Bridge here, and a mermaid is venturing out into the desert world in a mech suit, and because it's all desert, she has to constantly find fresh water, or she's basically going to suffocate. So that's always a problem. She's always in danger in that regard, even though she's in a big, tough mech suit. She's got her cute little companion, Lottie, and the axolotl. She makes allies along the way. The color scheme is just incredible. The pacing is incredible. There are mutants and weird berserkers and stuff. So, you know, there's just so much to like. I love this book, folks. It has a little bit of horror with some of the monsters and monstrous creatures they encounter. It's got a lot of different things in it. It's a good genre blend. It works for me, and the pacing is fantastic. Each issue, you are going to just boom, go right through. And I think you'll be encouraged to go back and then look at, like, the artistic details. It's really great storytelling. Well, look, some other people saying that. No. I adore this series. There you go. I'm glad that a bunch of other people enjoy it too. If MFTIM didn't exist, Mermaid would be number one, would be for me. MFTIM. MFTIM. I don't know. One of the best writer-artist books this year. Yeah, really cool. Oh, it's so good. It didn't grab you as much? I loved it. 6 issues came out this year. I think it was really, really impressive. And there's so many aspects of it that I like. Compositions, storytelling, character design work, character arcs, the coloring, just lots. Oh, my favorite thing is monsters. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to put that as your personal favorite. It's a really impressive book. Again, not really like me ranking these per se, just giving you like 10 recommendations that I really liked. Fantastic Four, folks. This is a lot of thanks to the writer Ryan North. What do I like that he does in this? Every issue, or sometimes 2 issues, tells a complete adventure, and it will focus on 1 to 2 characters primarily. And with the Fantastic Four having extended family, there's a few people to bounce around with, and some of them become supporting characters in some issues, and sometimes it's the whole team. It's a really great thing. But they focus on 3 elements in this that I like. 1, family. Lots of great family dynamics. That includes both humor and interpersonal dramas. It focuses on always a scientific mystery. For instance, in this one, the Fantastic Four came across some human bones where there should have been dinosaurs. And so, like, they were called in to investigate, and they find out that the bones match Reed and Sue exactly. Why would their bones be from, like, 16,000 years ago or whatever it was? Maybe not dinosaurs, but, like, 16,000 years ago is what I meant to say. So that was a really cool one. And then sometimes it just has bizarre, new, weird, and kind of funny things. Like, for instance, a dimension where all of the Marvel characters are dinosaurs. So Doctor Doom meets, a dinosaur Doctor Doom. It's such a great blend of character work, humor, family dynamics, and scientific discovery and clever solutions to problems, clever uses of powers to solve those problems. Sometimes they'll have things like, each of I'm trying to even think of where to start. They'll meet aliens and aliens that like travel at different times than they do, or invisible little meteors that are hitting Earth that they have to solve a problem for. Or when there was the big vampire crossover in Marvel for that one, that was just Reed Richards and Alicia Masters, the Thing's blind artistic wife, trying to save a bunch of people in a world where like all these vampires were attacking, and they just use Mr. Fantastic's flexible body to stretch to its utmost limits and cover Madison Square Garden while they look for like a way to generate a way to stop vampires. So good. So good. Oh, the noir issue is incredible. The noir issue is so good. The Fantastic and the Furious. Oh, either is fine. Yeah, either is fine for that. Ryan had the run of a lifetime this past year. This is going to go down in history. Folks, you'd be hearing more about it, I bet, if, this had one superstar artist on it, right? The art is more than serviceable. I think that these are all great illustrations. But as you can see, I listed a bunch of different artists that sort of jumped in and out here. Mostly Carlos Gomez this year, but there have been a few others. The Halloween issue with Reed and Johnny is fantastic. The Johnny relationship issue is fantastic. I know it sounds weird, but honestly, if you've never read Fantastic Four before, or if you've fallen off and you're just I like the characters, but too much connections to the bigger world and this and that and the other, this is a great jumping on point where it covers all the things that make Fantastic Four special, and it typically delivers those to you in a single issue or at most a 2-issue storyline. It's brilliant. Brilliant. I'm sorry if I missed it, but are you going to be picking a number 1 for the year? This was basically number 2. So, I am counting down and talking a little. I said it's not ranked. At the same time, some of these I feel very strongly about that, if I had to rank them, this probably would be my number 2, and the number 1 would probably be my number 1, but the others I could potentially reorder a little, if that makes sense. So let's talk about some honorable mentions. A bunch of you folks have mentioned some great ones in here. I think Gromitz definitely deserves to be in this list, and if I made this top 10 list tomorrow, it might be. I talked about that earlier with Rick. I think it would appeal to a lot of people. Asadora, one of my favorite manga. Anything by Naoki Urasawa, I definitely recommend strongly. This one's just coming out a little slower, which is kind of the only thing that keeps me from enjoying it as much. I wish I could just blast through the whole story, but it's really, really good. It is exceptional character work. It's exceptional world building. Really, really good. Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Spider-Man, I talked about, they're both really, really good. I think Peach Momoko is doing some beautiful character work and highlighting Japanese culture in a nice, subtle way that sort of helps us in the West learn a little something new. It's really fun in that regard. Absolute Batman, dude. Issue 2, where you see what the new Batmobile is, and it's one of those land mover dump trucks. It's about 2 stories high. That's a bonkers moment. There's a lot of really cool gadgets that this Batman has. Incredible Hulk has been so fun. It's Hulk versus monsters. Every issue is about him versus a monster. Some of those are Marvel monsters that have been around before, and some of them are brand new. But he's always fighting a monster, from Man-Thing to werewolves, demons. It's great. Uncanny X-Men. There's only been a few issues, so it was a little harder for me to justify this. But Gail Simone and all of a sudden I'm blanking on the regular artist. Give me 1 second here. David Marquez. I just remembered. David Marquez. are creating an X-Men that really harkens back to a lot of what I enjoyed in late 80s Chris Claremont. Lots of good interpersonal dynamics and lots of the X-Men sort of training the next generation. What it means to be an outsider that's trying to integrate. A lot of good stuff there. Feral was in my top 10 horror books this year, but the last 2 issues have made me like it even more. It's from cats' perspective, and it's drawn in a cartoony way, but house cats that have gotten out during basically a rabies outbreak that's treated like a zombie outbreak. So they're on the run, they're not used to being outside, and then when they finally seem to have found a safe haven, it's run by a hoarder. So they're just constantly in danger. Really like Feral. The Road. The Road was my number 2 horror pick for the year. It's an adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's very bleak dystopian book, but the art and storytelling in it it's really in your face and emotional. It's a father-son story more than anything else. Even though it's post-apocalyptic, it's a father-son story. And I just have a weakness for those kinds of stories. I'm a guy. I think guys often have a deep and complex relationship with their fathers, or our fathers themselves, and there's just something primal about that connects for me. World's Finest has been fun, especially when the main artist, Dan Mora, is on it. Mark Waid has been crafting some classic, modern day, but with some Silver and Bronze Age inspiration stories that are also mostly done in either 1 issue or 2 issues at the most. Just Batman and Superman at their finest. I would love to put an honorable mention on that. Rainbow Rowell's She-Hulk was a book I really enjoyed, so thank you for the super chat, because I honestly almost forgot it. That's a great recommendation. I remember you putting it on the honorable mention a bit ago. A shame it got canceled. At least it told a complete story. So, it ended. She was able to put a bow on her arc, and that was great. Thank you for the super chat. Great recommendation. What else did I have there? Radiant Black. Radiant Black was coming out a little slower, and that's honestly about the only thing that dinged it. But it had such an ambitious storyline where we saw 2 characters with the Radiant Black power. They've been friends, and they've each shared the Radiant Black power, and the timeline splits, and we see how each of them would handle a battle with this amazing alien invasion. It was so ambitious. So every month that it came out, we actually got 2 issues from 2 different perspectives. For it to split and then somehow recombine, I didn't know where it was going. I loved seeing the differences. It was additive to each other, where you actually could just read one timeline and get pretty much the story. But if you read both, of course, you're getting the complete story. Very ambitious. I'd never seen anything quite like that. That's a strong recommendation. Dracula the Impaler was on my top 10 horror list. Yeah. Very strong recommendation. Yeah, it was too bad Dan had to leave World's Finest, but he's doing some great work on Justice League Unlimited. That's nice. I hear that people that like Gargoyles have really liked the comic book version. I'm sure it helps that Greg Weisman is writing it, but I didn't grow up watching it, so I don't know it as well. White Boat has been a great book by Distillery. Scott Snyder, Francesco Francavilla. I think my favorite thing that they did together was last year, Night of the Ghoul, but White Boat is also really cool horror book. And I also put in Redcoat, but I also, when I'm talking about Distillery stuff, I could have just as easily put Somna in here. But Redcoat, I obviously interviewed Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch. I like that book a lot. I think that it's really, really cool. We're going to talk about it a little tonight because there's a new issue. Here's my number 1, folks. And it is my personal number 1 when I talk about the level of enjoyment that I had. The level of enjoyment. And so, yeah, Helen of Wyndhorn. it tells a complete story. Both of the, well, actually not, I shouldn't just say both. All the characters go through fascinating character arcs and literally do end up as very different, changed people because of the specific journey that they go on in this story. Helen goes from, like a woman with no family because her father like killed himself when she was kind of young, and she's a drunkard and stuff, to getting taken in by her wealthy but absent grandfather, who we find out goes to a literal supernatural world and is essentially Conan the Barbarian there. And their slow connection and getting to be there for each other and to show each other something of each other's world. Do I put Tom King that high that much? It's so good, folks, though. This artwork by Bilquis Evely blows my mind. Her characters are so consistent, they're so expressive, and the panel compositions and storytelling, I've talked about it week in and week out when it was coming out for each month's issue, just some of the best I've ever seen. There's obviously a delicate line, but there's a complexity, and yet she doesn't use more detail than is necessary. Like if it's just important that like these characters are sitting at a bed at nighttime, we're not seeing everything in the room that's important. She's framed it carefully. When they're going through, the woods, we need to see that it's mostly vegetation. So she puts in the work. It's an incredible story. It's emotional. It has some badass actions from time to time, as you would expect with a character that just goes around with a sword lopping monsters' heads off. But yeah, apparently, Steve, Tom King has said that there will be more. I don't know whether I'll like that as much because I feel like this tells a complete story, but maybe. I love this. Yeah, I believe that this was Mateus Lopez that did the coloring on this, who Rick was talking about using on one of his books this year. I believe it's Lopez. I love talking about Helen of Wyndhorn. Yes, P.K. Craig Russell, I could see some of that. I love it. Probably the thing I like the most about it, if I'm being completely honest, is the art. Okay? I love the art. But I do love this story. It gave me feelings. And a story that gives me feelings is you just sort of notice that when you're either like a little creeped out, a little like getting goosebumps thinking about like the adventure, when you're thinking about, emotional things and you feel like, tears a little bit behind your eyes. You're like, if you start to feel even a little of that when you're reading comics, you go, okay, I'm coming across something good. So there's my recommendations, folks. What did I miss? Go ahead and tell me in the comments below. And in a moment, we're going to do a quick look at some comics that came out. But again, it will probably be a quicker look at what came out this week. I told my wife, because she's feeling better, that we would go out tonight. So I am going to try to wrap it up 15, 20 minutes. So I'm going to give pretty quick thoughts on the comics that came out this week, okay? I don't know why I didn't put that in my at least honorable mentions. Sorry. I do like it. I picked it up. I haven't read issue 3 yet, but Raphael Grandpa is a unique talent. I love it. Tell you what. Let's talk about something a little serious for one moment, okay? And then we'll get into looking at the comics that came out this week. I want to mention, because it's the end of the year, this is my last show of 2024, I want to talk about the comics professionals that we lost in 2024 and just give some quick thoughts to them, okay? Hexagon Bridge I should talk about. Universal Monsters. I do love the main Wonder Woman book. Oh, you know what another good one is? Attaboy by Tony McMillan. That's a good one that I could have recommended. Enzuelo, the Emma Rios hardcover came out. Okay. Sunday. Thank you, folks. Appreciate the recommendations. Let me do an in memoriam. I'm not going to play Sarah McLachlan music with it or anything, but I want Jose Delbo. I grew up looking at his work on Transformers. That was like one of the first comics I got for myself. He also had an amazing run on Wonder Woman. Great Spanish artist who worked on a lot of mainstream stuff. Paul Neary, one of my favorite inkers when I was growing up. I loved his stuff on Alan Davis, but he also did a lot of editing and writing, helped with Captain Britain, the creation of that. Ramona Fraden, one of our last golden age artists who was literally putting out comics up to months before she died, well, covers, you know, and she was still taking commissions and stuff. Co-creator of Metamorpho, long run on Aquaman, lovely things that she worked on. Really, really beautiful artist. Akira Toriyama. Everybody at least knows about Dragon Ball. Even if you haven't read it or something, you've heard about it. Not necessarily old either. Worked a lot in video game adaptations too. Created things like Dr. Slump, of course. Desert Land? Yeah. Kira. MD Bright. MD Bright, Mark Bright, great artist who worked on things like Green Lantern, Emerald, was it Emerald Dawn, I believe it was. I liked his work growing up. He did a long run with Larry Hama on G.I. Joe, did a bunch of Iron Man. Sandland, that's what I'm thinking of. Thank you, folks. I was not Desert Land, Sandland. I knew it was sort of rhymey. But MD Bright. I'm doing this in chronological order, by the way, if it's not clear. Ed Piskor. None of us would have seen that coming. Ed was only 41. And yeah, I think a lot of you watched Cartoonist Kayfabe. Boy, it's a real tragedy, to be honest. That one's like, it's sad whenever we lose anybody. A lot of these are due to like age or illness. This one is a lot tougher to accept because he should have still been with us today and we wouldn't be thinking about this. But Ed did a lot of great comics and a lot of great commentary and highlighting of other artists with his show. So he did a lot for comics in his short time. He did more than most. Trina Robbins, a very influential feminist artist and writer in comics. Did a lot of important stuff with literally, this is what's bonkers. First woman to write Wonder Woman, and that wasn't until the 80s, the 1980s. How did DC never let a lady write Wonder Woman before the 1980s? But yeah, Trina did a lot of also important stuff in I could say indie, but I'd say more underground comics. A lot of important work in underground comics. And I'm seeing a lot of obviously beautiful comments in the side. I just want to get through this real quick. Not real quick. I just want to focus. Don Perlin. This is one of those sort of like, you know, workhorses that like doesn't always become somebody's favorite artist, but definitely made an impact. Co-creator of characters like Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight. Yeah, rest in peace, Don. Benny Potter, comic historian, much bigger channel than I'm ever likely to get to. And while he did a very different type of show than I did, he was always very kind to me in person. So he was a very kind person. I did get to meet him a bunch of times. And although we never did anything together, I don't think we ever collaborated in like a group or anything. But I did know him, and it was just very sad. He had an accident, and yeah, it's just too bad. Even though his show was more about like sort of explaining comics, I will definitely say he probably still brought in a lot of new readers. I hope he did. I have to assume he did with the reach that he had. Thank you. I did collaborate with him at the At-Home Comic-Con in a sense. You're right. I thought I did something. Peter B. Gillis. Folks, I've got an episode on Comic Tropes about Strike Force Morituri, one of my favorite ideas for a science fiction anything, and it was a comic book. Peter B. Gillis was the writer on that, as well as a bunch of early attempts at using digital art in comics. Did a lot of great stuff, especially throughout the 80s. Really great. Joyce Brabner will probably be remembered first as the partner of Harvey Pekar, but in her own right also wrote a lot of comics, and had worked as a retailer in comics, had done some costuming. She wrote some great stuff. She co-wrote with Harvey stuff like Our Cancer Year, which is a fantastic comic book, a real life story. Really, really wonderful lady. She did a story with a friend of mine on a book he had called Postcards. My friend Jason collected old postcards that would have like a real letter on the back, and then he would give it to artists, and they would like try to come up with a story for what they think that was happening. And Joyce did one of those, which is very cool. Bernie Moreau. Bernie Moreau is another one that we should still have with us. Another person that did not die because of illness or age. I'm trying to be YouTube compliant with my words. Bernie was a unique and special artist. I was most familiar with his work from Grendel. I love Grendel. He did some stuff that was published in Madman, and he had who was his character? The Jam. Great character, great indie, weird, funny superhero. Really great artist, and I'm sad to not have him. John Cassidy died pretty young. Incredible artist. Worked on one of my favorite books, Planetary. I think his run on Astonishing X-Men is rock solid. Co-created characters like Armor that Peach Momoko is still using today on her book. So John was a brilliant artist, and from everything I've heard from pros around the world, everybody liked him. Apparently, he was just super, super kind. Carl Moline. Carl Moline was a great artist. I really liked his work on a Buffy in the Future comic called Frey, but did lots of great superhero stuff at Marvel and DC as well. Carl was great. Had a really clean art style that felt organic, but like nice, clean, straightforward line art. Really liked Carl's art. Kazuo Umezu, a great manga artist who was very influential in terms of horror manga. Did a lot of horror manga, and yet as a person, he was more of a joker and a prankster, and very iconic because he was always in his red and white striped shirt, like something you'd see Waldo from Where's Waldo wear. Always had that. Painted his house to look that way. So even though in real life he was light, he'd tell horror stories that were very dark. So it just sort of highlights the complexity of people. And Greg Hildebrandt. Obviously, the Hildebrandt brothers did a lot of painted work over the years. A lot of fantasy stuff, but they did a lot of work for Marvel, especially in the 90s when Marvel did a lot of Marvel masterworks like cards and stuff. That's what I grew up seeing Greg's work on the most, was that kind of stuff. But yeah, also beloved people. So some really great creators. I'll pull up the comics that I had, but I'm not going to do deep reviews this week because I do sort of want to get going. I'm just going to highlight a couple little things real quick. Let me present another camera, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight to go through sort of the end of the year episode. Boop, boop. I picked up New Gods because I'd been hearing good things, and I usually like Ram V. The artwork by it's Evan Cagle. Very detailed, beautiful artwork. But I've never, aside from Jack Kirby, I've never massively connected with the New Gods. Here and there I've liked them. I did like Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. This one, is about Orion has been sent by Highfather, who's normally like, the good, noble head of all the New Gods. He's been sent a new god. And he's like, look, I've never in my life disobeyed Highfather or failed. So he goes to Mr. Miracle and tells him, I'm going to give you 7 days. You have to hide this kid so that I can't kill it. I don't want to like not do what I'm asked, but you have to like hide it. And I was just like, I mean, okay, but I didn't really connect very, very deeply on that story. I'm sorry. It just didn't really do much for me. Batman the Long Halloween is issue 4, and it really is sort of a side story that just has Robin learning how to cope with like the fact that Batman sometimes gets majorly messed up, and Batman is in like sort of a live and die situation where he's been shot in the lung, and they need to wake him up, like Alfred and Batman and Robin. I mean, Alfred and Robin just sort of does his own adventure. It's a good standalone story with some really charming art by Cliff Chiang. Doesn't feel like it majorly ties into a big comic arc. Feels like just sort of a standalone one-shot to highlight how cool Robin is, which I'm fine with. It's just sort of a standalone one-shot within an arc, is more what it felt like. This is one I've really been enjoying. Black Canary, Best of the Best. Ever since I'm really ultra sensitive ever since somebody says that I highlight Tom King a lot. Just to be clear, I don't like everything he's done, but I do like this, which is Black Canary and Lady Shiva are having an MMA fight that's televised, and Lady Shiva is the best fighter in DC continuity, but Black Canary's up there. Every issue is one round of their fight and the behind-the-scenes training that Black Canary does to get there, because she definitely is the underdog. And this is mostly about her relationship with her mother, who was the first Black Canary. So, I don't know. All of this worked for me. Cool action in the ring. And Ryan Sook can draw anything, by the way. Look at that. That's like the original Black Canary. And he can draw like believable kids. This is Dinah as a kid. There was one or two images that I thought looked exceptionally good. But I will also say that these training scenes, which are sort of montages, that like works. This looks like, film can do montages with cuts, but comics have to get more creative and more esoteric with their approach. And I really liked some of these montages that Ryan Sook crafted. Oh, here, I'm going to come across, like, that looks like a kid's face, as compared to an adult. Just slightly awkward with, like, the proportions and everything, but a believable kid. And at the same time, great staging, like really moving the camera around in a way that isn't overwhelming, but changes up the shots. Like this low-angle shot where Lady Shiva drops a leg across Black Canary's sort of neck, like is very, it's more impactful because we're in up close, and and it's like squished between two things. So this is a really fun fight comic. I don't know who did this variant cover. I'm not an expert on variant cover artists. Can anyone tell me? I don't know where to look. Like there's the signature, but I don't recognize it. This was just on the stand, and I was just like, okay, so it's got the regular cover and this, and for the regular price, sure, I'll get it. Yeah, totally just worth it for Ryan Sook's art, but it's a very different type of story. Void Rivals, I think, gets more fun sometimes the more Robert Kirkman is allowed to play with the characters from G.I. Joe and Marvel. Like in this, he's using Cobra Law characters that are on a mission to destroy Transformers technology in general, and they get abducted by a Transformers character, this alien bounty hunter called the Skuxoid. And it's got some great dialogue and character work with Hot Rod meeting up with Springer. Hot Rod has been looking for Springer, and Springer has been stuck on the main character's alien ring world. And then one half of the main cast is exploring the hidden history between these two races that have been at war. And it seems like it was created by some Cybertronian thing. It's called Vector Theta. Well, we know that there was in the cartoons, there was something like this called Vector Sigma that could create Transformer life. So could Vector Theta be something similar that created, like, the Agorian life? I don't know, but it's fun. This was definitely fun. This was one of the most fun Void Rivals I had yet. Leslie Lee for the cover art. Okay, thank you for the heads up. Dudes, yeah, it feels like that. It feels like that. Real quick, Recoat, this is a one-shot. Recoat is like an immortal. He was, a mercenary, and he became immortal. That's all that's important. In 1873, I'm going to skip some stuff that would be a little spoilery. He drops in on a house and asks for a room for the night. And what he doesn't know is that they are actually a family of murderers that kill people that stop by to ask for a room, and they steal their stuff. But obviously Simon Pure, the titular Recoat character, is immortal. So he wakes up in this horrific, they've got a cellar full of the dead bodies, and they just put lime over it to cover the stench and dissolve and stuff. What this ends up being is, imagine if the Highlander went up against Texas Chainsaw Massacre's family, Leatherface's family. So that's kind of cool. The bad guys get some just desserts, but I won't give it all. I won't give it all away. Wait, it's based on a real family? There is at the end of this, some as though the governor of the state of Kansas had issued this thing for the Bender family. I wonder if the Bender family was real, or if this is just based on an idea of an actual killer family. But it's kind of both creepy and a little satisfying, because that these guys are going to get their comeuppance, but they're horrific, and you want to see them get their comeuppance. And Simon Pure isn't exactly that talented or that noble or anything, but in this specific case, he's sort of able to do some good, and I liked it. This G.I. Joe issue makes this is the long-running A Real American Hero G.I. Joe. This is the original continuity by writer Larry Hama. It's up to issue 312. He wrote all but maybe 2 fill-in issues that were done by Marvel back in the day. And in this, we get to see a hand-to-hand fight between Destro and Serpentor, and one of them absolutely emerges the victor by the end of the issue. There's also Destro seemingly versus Cobra Commander, but we know that it's actually just one of Cobra Commander's troopers in his battle armor. So anyway, there's in the middle, there's a bunch of what do you call them? Zombie cyborgs. It's a pretty wild story. And they have to go up against both the G.I. Joe ninjas and the Dreadnoks. This is just crazy stuff. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably more than is worth explaining. Yeah, basically another Fred, although he doesn't get developed as much yet. That chapter podcast had a trapdoor under the head of the table seat. Oh my God. So that's real. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Dudes, what's fun about this is it is wall-to-wall action, and it's got different factions of bad guys teaming up with some good guys and some other factions of bad guys. They're all gunning for Cobra Commander. But it's wall-to-wall action, which is fun. So I said I wanted to talk briefly. This is the last new comic that I have this week, Wonder Woman. And I need to be careful because there's a small twist in this of a sacrifice that Wonder Woman had made to help Steve Trevor in her past. But this is mostly about her preparing people to fight the Tetracide, which she's like, I cannot beat. Sorry, where do we see the Tetracide? We sort of see it up here. I showed you it in the top 10 for the year. Yeah. Wonder Woman goes up against the Tetracide, but she's like, I can't beat it. It does a few things. It emits a sound that drives anyone that hears it crazy, and they will like run to it, trample each other to get to the sound, and then it will like kill you and then rip your soul to shreds. And if you can't hear it, it will physically like walk in and like touch people, and that will like destroy your mind. So there's a badass fight here, and Wonder Woman actually does get caught. She does something incredible to escape from this, but that involves magic, so I'm going to skip past that. There's some nice flashbacks to how she, made sacrifices for Steve, why she fell for him, how she grew up with Cersei. And then at the very end, she like convinces the citizens of the town that she cannot defeat this creature, but she's got a way for them to potentially defeat the Tetracide. Really likable protagonist with great action and great twists. Like I say, I don't want to give the twist away about how she uses magic and what her sacrifices involve. Finally, just real quick, I got this from, I told you I was going to be on West Coast DAVEngers this week. Well, he had one, and he had an art book by Go Nagai that I bought. I haven't looked at it yet. I thought I'd just real quick flip through, and then I was going to get some dinner with my wife. Go Nagai, creator of Devilman, creator of Cutie Honey, Mazinger Z. So sort of created those first ideas of the piloted gigantic mech. Super influential artist, and I can't wait to sort of go through this. Violence Jack was really influential to things like Berserker, which I love. So I'm going to be enjoying flipping through this and learning a little bit more about Go Nagai. Thanks, Dave, for having something so unique. Oh, and I guess I almost forgot. At the store, they had these Transformers collector's cards that Dynamite put out. So here, I'll just open a pack and see what we got. Oh, look at that. Go Nagai, Devilman, Mazinger Z. Good, I'm glad so many people like it. Look at all the mechs, it's glorious. All right, let's see what you can get in these Transformers cards. Looks like, Springer, who was in this week's Void Rivals. So I got Springer with some details on him. I've got a photo of, I think he might have been called Long Haul. He was the dump truck Constructicon, as my nerdiness showing. Ravage. There's the card art for Ravage. There's the card art for Laserbeak. Something that looks like it's part of, I guess if you get enough, you can put together a poster, and it's all glittery and shiny. That's fun. Oh, cool. Oh, it's the original art from the first wave of Transformers, actually. This was on the back of every package. Got it. So that's fun. Brawn. I had him as a kid. There's the package art for, I think, Wave 3 of Transformers. Again, yeah, you put this together. Card 7 of 9. Okay. The 86 back package art. You can see a little bit of Metroplex. Some of the Combaticons. Some of the Stunticons. That's fun. Is that Skywarp? That's Skywarp. And Blue Streak? Yep. Hey, and it even got Optimus Prime. That's fun. Well, those are fun for sort of a nostalgic dive back in time. 40 years. It's amazing. Transformers has some staying power. Folks, I hope that you have a fantastic 2025. Let me do that. Thank you for watching the show tonight. It means a lot to me. I think we've had a good year, but I think that I've got some plans to make 2025 an even better one. And I always talk about, hey, I'm going to work harder, or I'm going to get better equipment. That's a piece of it. But I think what I'm going to do for the show in 2025 is this. I'm going to think a little more strategically. What I'm trying to do is think of a different workflow. Let's start from scratch. How could I create a different workflow that would allow episodes to be produced more efficiently? And I think that the answer is I need help. Does that mean I hire an editor? Maybe. Does it mean I might ask for help gathering images? Quite possibly. I may do one of those two things, and those could both be things that speed the show up. So I'm going to look into things like that. That's my commitment to you guys, and I'm going to work real hard to try to get a script that I'm happy with. I think I've put some good work in on it to potentially put out my own comic. I think that would make me happy. Enjoy your time with Chrissy. Sugar-free Baja Blast. I did try a Baja Blast this week, and of course I thought of you. I was like, well, this is $2 that came from Steve. It was good. It was really good. I liked it. Thank you. Thank you all. It really means a lot to me. Yeah, see you next year. Hoping for a good new year. Happy New Year. Folks, double salutes all around. Give yourselves a double salute. Give each other double salutes. Thank you for these lovely, kind comments. Yeah, I can't believe it's going to be a whole new year until we get to see each other. I'm sorry to hear it's been a tough year for you, Circuitron. I want all you guys to do well. I like all of you. You're such good people. So yeah, thank you all. Thursday, yes, Thursday. Please, I hope you'll consider checking out West Coast DAVEngers show so that I can, sell some art and. You guys, oh, sorry, it glitched for half a second there. The next trash movie bonanza? Well, there was a trailer for a comic book movie that came out recently that people were talking about, a certain Superman, and that may have inspired us to pick a specific movie for the next trash movie bonanza. I'm sorry to hear that, Black Phoenix, that it wasn't a great December. It was a little tough for me too, but it seems to be ending on a better note. As of right now, Chrissy and I are planning on taking a vacation. That means that from the 14th of January through the end of the month, I will be traveling. I'll probably do some live streams. This one might shift a little for the exact day or time, but I'm planning on doing a live stream. And for Comic Tropes, question mark as to what I can put out while I'm traveling. But anyway, yeah, maybe. Anyway, you all are great. Have a happy new year. Here's what you get. You get a horn and Conan. Do you think that you'll have fun in the new year? Well, he's already having a great time. Take care, everybody. Keep reading comics. Bye.